Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the China Report on News 6 World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, while hosting Brunei's second Minister of Foreign Affairs, has shared that China is ready to work with Brunei to maintain high-level exchanges and collaboration to further accelerate China-Brunei ties. The annual report on China's human rights for this year, compiled by the China Society for Human Rights Studies, has recently been published. The book includes 28 reports that is yet to be assessed by international community for now. Japanese Defense Ministry has released that Japan's Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi and his U.S. counterpart Pete Hegseth spoke on the phone on Friday about the recent confrontation between Japanese and Chinese self-defense forces. Fighter jets, as Tokyo said that it did not seek to escalate the tensions. However, China blames Japan that it is escalating the tensions. According to the Aviation Industry Corporation of China, a large unmanned aerial vehicle named Jiutian has completed its maiden flight. The domestically developed general-purpose drone, measuring 16.35 meters in length and 25 meters in wingspan, underscores China's expanding air force. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has announced that Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi will be visiting the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia and Jordan from today to 16 December. This trip comes as he was invited by all the three Arab nations and has accepted the invitation. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun has said that China strongly urges the European Union to stop interfering in other countries' internal affairs. Under the guise of human rights, the remarks comes as a response to a question about a statement issued by the EU delegation to China on International Human Rights Day. Hong Kong Services Department of the Hong Kong have posthumously conferred the honorary title of Senior Fireman on late Ho Wah Ho, who passed away fighting the blaze of type of fire in recognition of his exemplary service and selfless dedication to duty, while the investigation on this fire still continues. Thailand's king has endorsed a royal decree to dissolve the lower house of parliament, paving the way for general election early next year. The decree was countersigned by the Prime Minister, Charnvirakul, cited his administration's status as a minority government as the primary reason for the dissolution. Now we start this news with China and Japan. The White House has said that President Donald Trump is able to maintain both a productive relationship with China and a strong alliance with Japan, even as tensions between these two Asian powers continue to rise. White House spokeswoman Karoline Leavitt has described Japan as a vital U.S. ally, citing the president's personal ties and ongoing trade cooperation. She has also emphasized that the president holds a solid working relationship with China's President Xi Jinping. According to spokesperson Leavitt, the administration believes the United States can and should engage with China constructively while still upholding its long-standing and very strong partnership with Japan. Let's listen in.
To your second question with respect to Japan and China, the president has a phenomenal relationship with the new Prime Minister of Japan, as you know. He was pleased to meet her when we went to Asia a couple of months ago, and they have spoken a few times since. They continue to be engaged with one another, and Japan is a great ally of the United States, as evidenced by their personal relationship and our continued trade relations with Japan. With respect to China, the president also has a good working relationship with President Xi, which he believes is a good thing for our country, and he believes that the United States should be in a position to have a good working relationship with China while maintaining our very strong alliance with China.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Andrew K.P. Long, he's an independent China strategist, joins us live from Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how do you analyze U.S. or Trump in particular's, relationship? Do you think that he will be able to balance constructive engagement with both China and Japan?
This is no more than a manifestation of the long-held saying that in international relations, there is no such thing as permanent friends or permanent enemies, only permanent interests. So there are, of course, strong American interests in the alliance with Japan as part of a China containment policy, along with South Korea, along with Australia, or with India, through the Quad, with Australia, the AUKUS nuclear submarine deal, and with the Philippines as well. So this is part of the China containment policy, which is further enshrined in the latest national security strategy released by Washington only a couple of days ago. So there is no surprise that Trump wants to reaffirm that the United States want to have good relationship with both China and Japan.
So why do you think this timing suggests? Caroline Levitt said, and I also saw many expats online questioning whether Trump can or will be able to balance this or not. So what do you think, what risks or benefits arise from President Donald Trump's attempt to sustain these relationships with two rival powers?
Well, the timing for this statement is because in recent weeks, the new Japanese Prime Minister, Takaichi, makes some provocative remarks, which in the eyes of of Beijing is throwing spanner in the works as far as Taiwan's unification is concerned. She was saying that anything happen to Taiwan would be an existential threat to Japan. And not only is throwing spanner in the works in the area of Taiwan unification, preferably by peaceful means, but also raises the possibility of a rise of militarism in Japan. Of course, Takaichi is the forerunner of this militarism ideology, which holds that Japan should behave as a normal nation. After all, there's so many years after the Second World War. And then Japan should rearm and reexert its influence around the region. Now, of course, there is a degree of validity in this, but on the other hand, this must be looked at in the context that Japan has never apologized for what it did during the Second World War. Unlike West Germany, the former German Chancellor, Willy Brandt, almost immediately sort of apologize in public view by kneeling down in public in the full eyes of the international world, apologizing for the Nazi Germany. But that is not has not been replicated in any way at all by Japan, and Japan has always refused to apologize formally for what it did during the Second World War. Above all, continue to pay homage to the Nagasaki shrines for in honor of what they perceive as martyrs or Japanese heroes. Of course, this shrine includes Japanese soldiers who died in the Second World War, but also housing Class A criminals by the International Criminal Court. And so this is rubbing salt in China's wounds. And hence, Beijing has been responding in the way it did. And of course, the United States doesn't want Japan to stir the pot. And that's why President Trump spoke to Takaichi only about last week. But on the other hand, still want to maintain good relations as strong allies with Japan as part of his China containment policy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we stay on the topic. Japan's defense minister and U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has said that China's recent actions are not conducive to regional peace. Following a joint call to address growing security concerns in the Indo-Pacific, Tokyo has said that the two ministers exchanged candid views on what it calls an increasingly severe security environment, highlighting a December 6th incident in which a Chinese military aircraft allegedly targeted a Japanese self-defense force plane with radar. Both sides have expressed serious concerns over any moves that could heighten regional tensions. Their statement comes amid an ongoing diplomatic spat between Japan and China following recent remarks by Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi regarding Taiwan. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Andrew K.P. Long. He's an independent China strategist, joins us live from Hong Kong. Now, looking at this, what are we to make? As you know, Japan blames China, China blames Japan. What is next?
Well, of course, this will carry on as far as the rise of Japanese militarism continues to be perceived as a threat, not only to China, but to neighbors in the Asia Pacific. And of course, this kind of conflict is not in the best interest of the United States, and so the United States would want to maintain stability, but also wants to maintain a strong alliance with Japan to contain China. So it's just like eating his cake and having it at the same time. Well, that's quite normal as far as President Trump is concerned. But on the other hand, China wants to have a peaceful environment to grow its economy, to reach its next level of development. The 5-year plan, the parameters have been released, including China would doubling down on its self-reliance, continue to grow its economy and bring a better standard of living to its people so as to reach a higher level of GDP per capita, so that China would become a strong nation in the next milestone, the year 2035, which we're likely to see doubling of its per capita income based in 2020. And this achievable with an annual growth rate of something like 4.3%. So this is perfectly within reach. But that, of course, depends on a peaceful environment. But that doesn't mean that China would be sleeping on its defense of its self-interest. On the other hand, part of the China's trajectory is both economic advancement, but also military deterrence. And hence, we would like to see this to and fro. But I think neither the United States nor China wants any instability in the region. But as a matter of narrative, as a matter of foreign relations policy and statements, that's what to be expected.
Right. And lastly, some of our guests say that Ukraine and Russia could lead to Third World War, or Ukraine and Russia is a kind of pivotal moment in this world right now among all the conflicts that are happening. But some counterfeit that, and some say no, it is China, Japan, and Taiwan that is the main, or that could lead to further instability, and that could lead to whole globe drawn into this conflict. What's your take on that?
Well, to that you can throw in what's over Gaza. I mean, that could the Gaza situation is not yet by no means ended, and there are still undercurrents. So there are various flashpoints. I mean, you rightly mentioned Ukraine, and of course in the South China Sea with what's going to happen to Taiwan. But I think that at the end of it all, both the two great powers, China and the United States, do not want a war. Neither, for that matter, Putin. But Putin is now gaining the upper hand. That's acknowledged by even President Trump himself. President Trump says the Ukrainians are running out of cards. And then even the Europeans, in spite of their narrative of support, because the degree of support in terms of money simply not enough. And in terms of ammunition. The Ukrainians are also running out of ammunition very quickly, and above all, running out of bodies. The soldiers have been dying like flies, as in the case in Russia. But Russia is a much bigger country compared with Ukraine, and it's making a steady headway in the Donbass area, and that's part of the key elements of a deal privately reached between Putin and President Trump. And of course, Trump's administration want to impose this agreement on the Europeans. But unfortunately, the Europeans are too weak, having outsourced the defense for the American for too long, in spite of their rhetoric. I think that the momentum is the unfortunate momentum is moving ahead because both the Ukrainians and the Europeans are running out of strong cards.
Yes.
Unfortunately, they have to accept some sort of an armistice along the line of what happened in the Korean War, because the Korean War never ended. It was only an armistice. But that armistice at least would ensure peace for a long time, and it would open up opportunities for investment from the United States and for even China to play a role in reconstruction. So I think that you could look at the whole world now as the old rules of the so-called rule-based order has been thrown out of the window, and then there's a new ball game based on balance of power.
Indeed, very interesting and scary. Thank you so much for sharing that insight and analysis. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Andrew K.P. Long for joining us as always and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Mexico. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has defended the new tariff bill approved by her Congress, which targets imports from China and other countries outside free trade agreements. The bill increases tariffs on a range of goods, including automobiles, textiles, clothing, and appliances, with rates ranging from 5 to 50%. Sheinbaum has emphasized that the measures set to take effect in 2026 are intended to strengthen Mexico's national economy, not to provoke conflict. Let's listen in.
Estas reuniones. Nuestro interés no es generar conflicto con ningún país del mundo, y respetamos mucho a China y tenemos muy buenas relaciones con ellos. La razón de estos ajustes en la ley pues tienen que ver con fortalecer la economía nacional.
However, China has expressed concerns over the bill. In a press briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Goh Jia-kun has urged Mexico to reconsider the tariffs, warning against protectionist policies that could harm bilateral trade relations. China has long opposed unilateral tariff increases and called for more cooperative solutions to trade issues. Let's listen in.
中方主管部门已就此作出回应，你可以查阅。我们想强调，逆经济全球化潮流而动，搞保护主义，损人不利己。希望莫方及早纠正有关错误做法，同中方相向而行，共同维护好双边经贸关系大局。
As the new tariffs approach implementation, tensions between these two countries are expected to rise, with both sides likely to engage in further dialogue. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. AJ Dua. He's a former Secretary of Commerce and Senior Economist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. Dua, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, does Mexico's new tariffs represent a justified effort to protect its national economy? And you know, the timing is very interesting, and as it comes that just last week or a few days ago, not last week, actually this week, just a few days ago, Trump and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Sheinbaum had a discussion, and this just comes after that. What do you think about this?
I think the reasons advanced by the Mexican president, she had presided at the meeting, understandably, which took the decision a couple of days ago, that on certain economies of Asia with which it does not have bilateral trade agreements in position, and that will be India, South Korea, China, Thailand, and Indonesia, it is going to be checking their imports, and the biggest of them is China, from which it imports over $125 billion worth of goods annually, which is one hell of a lot, if you would agree with me. It thinks that by allowing goods to come in from China at the low rates, it is hurting the Mexican economy by way of local production and the local employment creation. And that applies, and the duty has been levied not across the board. It's on selected items which cover the large imports from China, imports from India, and from India, as you know, the largest are auto components as well as small light automobiles. For us, Mexico is the third largest importer of Indian cars after Saudi Arabia and South Africa. So it is both a defensive mechanism on part of Mexico, and also it could be, and I do not rule that out at all, that from Mexico, the US fears that entry port trade takes place. That means goods made elsewhere in the world arrive in Mexico under the garb of, because of the lower duties, and then they get shipped across to the United States. So it's a way of bypassing the US high tariff which it has imposed on some of these countries. So it could be a way to appease the United States, as you mentioned, because only recently there is a review started of the trade agreement between Canada, US, and Mexico. And that's currently under review. So Mexico would not like to be seen as to be defaulting on its trilateral agreement. So it is both reasons of self-protection, and largely self-protection, self-interest, but at the same time of checking certain amount of unauthorized or lower duty paid items from Mexico into the US.
Very insightful indeed. And Dr. AJ, now what economic risks does Mexico face if rising tariffs leads to reduced trade flows or retaliatory measures from China? As you know, we saw a spokesperson of China issue a statement. Can that be seen as a warning towards Mexico?
Not necessarily, because China would certainly like to have Mexico on its side. It would not, because it comes in very handy for one, China, a lot of Chinese goods and equipment get imported there, $130 billion, as was just mentioned a while ago. So it would not like to see it take any aggressive action against, more aggressive action against China. What Chinese statement is, it is saying that we should not be taking unilateral steps to check imports, and that the multilateral arrangements which existed, which by and large it refers to the WTO, which encourages free trade, that should be kept in place. So it is, I don't take it as a warning, otherwise it's going to hurt China equally, if not more, then it will hurt Mexico. So they are saying, please don't continue with it, let's talk about it, rather than your unilateral action.
Thank you very much, Dr. AJ, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, China's leaders have committed to a proactive fiscal policy for 2026, aiming to boost consumption and investment in a bid to achieve around 5% economic growth. The announcement, which made during the Central Economic Work Conference, has highlighted the efforts to address a slowdown in the second half of 2025 and promote domestic demand alongside industrial investment. While the government plans to increase household income and stimulate services consumption, concerns persist over China's ongoing reliance on a production-driven economy. China's economic resilience in 2025, despite trade tariff challenges, has been notable. though its reliance on global markets, particularly the US, remains a vulnerability. As its trade surplus continues to grow, tensions with trade partners, including Europe, are escalating. The IMF and others have criticized China's production-focused model as unsustainable in the long run. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. AJ Dua. He's a former Secretary of Commerce and senior economist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. AJ, for staying with us. Now, how do you see this, how feasible could be China's target of 5% growth in 2026, given its continued reliance on production-driven model and tensions with, its consumers like EU and US and even sometimes India?
I'm not too apprehensive about China getting a 5% rate of growth in the second half of the year, because that 5% itself is pretty low compared to what the Chinese had set, the target or the goal they had set for themselves. And it is lower than what it had been achieving earlier. The Chinese are worried more about the future than I think the immediate 6 months, because though what you mentioned that certain countries or certain regions are no longer importing as much as they did from China earlier, China has a trade surplus which it just declared, and in 11 months' time, from January to November this year, it has $1 trillion surplus trade. So it is doing pretty well despite the hiccups which it might be experiencing in some parts of the world. What the Chinese Economic Conference or the economic body has pointed out to the larger body is that, look, this is not sustainable. We are concentrating more on short-term rates of growth, short-term economic goals, and forgetting that what is required or what is good for the Chinese economy in the longer run. And that is to say, please do not go along only worried about growth and put money for capital formation, that's by way of investment, even when it is not necessarily productive. That's been also pointed out in the statement put out by the Chinese newspapers in New York. And what the Chinese have agreed, it seems at a higher level, is that henceforth we will worry or we will be equally concerned about boosting consumption and investment. They are not giving up that goal of investment, that means longer term growth, as long as they balance it. They correct the imbalance which was hitherto in favor of growth. That means investment rather than boosting the consumption within the country. I think a balancing was highly called for, and the Chinese have admitted at this level, the fairly high level of the governance, that they would be henceforth they'll be concerned about both, and that production, yes, but production not necessarily for only exports, but also to boost what is required locally. Hence, if it is required, fiscal incentives to boost local incomes, local consumption would be taken. This is what the Chinese seem to be meaning when they say they will be correcting their economic imbalance for the future.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Dr. AJ Dua for joining us today and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on to our next news. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren has called for NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang and Commerce Department Secretary Howard Lutnick to testify after U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans to greenlight sales of NVIDIA's second most advanced AI chips to China. In a speech on the Senate floor, she also raised concerns that Trump could potentially silence his own Justice Department after it announced a crackdown on a smuggling operation that included those chips, known as the H200, to China on the same day Trump announced the policy change. NVIDIA has emphasized in a statement that H200 sales to China would still require a U.S. government license and described the overall share of chips going to China as a small percentage of the advanced AI chips already sold to U.S. consumers. Now we move on to our next news. China and Brunei have reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening bilateral ties during talks in Beijing between Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Brunei's Second Minister of Foreign Affairs, Diaoyu Islands. Wang has said that Beijing is ready to advance the important consensus set by the two countries' leaders and take new steps towards building what it calls a China-Brunei community with a shared future. He has also restated China's position on Taiwan, criticizing what he described as harmful and incorrect comments made by Japan's current leader regarding the issue. Brunei, for its part, reiterated that Taiwan is an inalienable part of China and reaffirmed its commitment to the One China policy, saying it supports China's goal of national reunification. The two sides also discussed a range of regional and international issues of shared concerns. And that's a wrap on the China Report. Keep watching News 6 World for more news updates from around the world.